What if I told you that one of hip-hop's most respected OGs, Size, has a secret list of artists he just couldn't stand?
Be in the middle of the night, is on my left and is on my right, yelling rip.
And we're not talking about industry shade or subtle disses. We're talking real tension, on-record insults, public warnings, and statements so cold they still echo years later. From internet-born rappers to self-proclaimed gangsters, Ice-T's never held back. And now, that list is public. These are the 7 artists Ice-T hated the most, and the reasons behind each beef will blow your mind. But before we dive into the names, here's what you need to understand. Ice-T wasn't just another rapper, he was the blueprint. Coming straight from the streets of South Central LA, he turned real-life gang culture into raw poetry and never pretended to be something he wasn't.
So if you see another laying dead in the street in a puddle of blood from his head to his feet, I hope it's time all you ass get hip this brim. It's West Side rolling 60 cup rip.
So when he saw the next generation of rappers playing dress up with the gangster image or using hip-hop as a gimmick, he didn't stay silent. He called it out loudly, publicly, sometimes brutally. Let's break it down one artist at a time. Starting with number 1, Soulja Boy. In 2008, something snapped in the world of hip-hop. The tension between old-school rappers and a rising generation of internet-born artists finally exploded, and right in the middle of that crossfire stood a 17-year-old named Soulja Boy. His hit song, Crank That Soulja Boy, was everywhere on cell phones, on YouTube, in school gyms, in commercials. But to Ice-T, that wasn't a celebration of hip-hop, it was its funeral. On the Black Ice, Urban Legends mixtape, Ice-T let loose. He didn't hold back. Soulja Boy, you single-handedly killed hip-hop.
Ice-T, Silver the Navigator, Soulja Boy, eat it bit, the single-handedly hip-hop.
That line hit like a. But Ice-T wasn't just criticizing the song, he was condemning what it stood for. To him, Crank That wasn't just a dance track. It was a symbol of everything that was dragging hip-hop away from its roots. No storytelling, no lyrical depth, just repetitive hooks and a viral routine designed for ringtone sales. He didn't stop at the music either. He mocked Soulja's look, his hairstyle, his beads, his youthful swagger. And just like that, the line was drawn. Soulja Boy wasted no time firing back. He jumped on YouTube, still a new tool for artists back then, and clapped back with his own video. He called Ice-T washed up, ancient, and jealous. He mocked his acting career and claimed he was just bitter because the culture had moved on without him.
The reality of it is that the game done changed. It's new niggas out, it's young niggas eating, and nobody want to hear that old shit no more.
The video went viral. Teenagers loved it. Older fans were split. Some saw Ice-T as a cranky gatekeeper, mad that a kid was winning the game he helped create. Others saw him as a defender of the culture, finally saying what so many were thinking. This wasn't just a clash between two artists, it was the opening shot in a war over hip-hop's identity, a generational rift that exposed just how far the genre had shifted from message to meme, from struggle to spectacle. And even though Ice-T later softened his tone, saying he had no personal grudge against Soulja, he never took back his words. Because to him, Soulja wasn't the problem, he was the proof of it. Next is number 2, Kanye West. And this time, it wasn't about lyrics or style, it was about something much bigger. Image, power, and what some saw as the ultimate betrayal. In 2018, Kanye West stunned the world when he walked into the White House wearing a bright red MAGA hat, hugged Donald Trump, and told reporters he viewed the president as a father figure. For some, it was free-thinking brilliance. For others, especially within the Black community, it was a public unraveling, a cultural icon shaking hands with someone many believed was working against everything hip-hop stood for. Ice-T had seen enough. He reportedly didn't hold back. In an interview, he said, "There's no way in God's earth that I would meet Donald Trump. He'll use you for a photo op, then toss you aside." And that wasn't just a jab, it was a deep wound for someone who had always spoken out against oppression, who had helped give voice to the streets. Ice-T allegedly compared Kanye's stunt to showing up to a hurricane in a clown suit, a wild display in the middle of real-life chaos, with no purpose but spectacle. No strategy, no vision, just ego and confusion. What made it even more painful for Ice-T was that he once respected Kanye. He publicly praised songs like Jesus Walks, and through the wire music that had meaning, purpose, even spiritual weight. Back then, Kanye was seen as the bridge between conscious rap and mainstream success. But by the time Ye made it to the Oval Office, Ice-T saw someone who had lost control of his message, his image, and maybe even himself. The evolution from hungry artist to political showpiece didn't feel like growth, it felt like surrender. Kanye never responded directly to Ice-T's comments, but he didn't have to. The backlash spoke for itself. Fans were divided. Industry peers like T.I., Questlove, and Diddy voiced their discomfort. For Ice-T, it wasn't about canceling Ye, it was about accountability. He wasn't attacking Kanye's art. He was calling out the performance. Because in his eyes, Kanye didn't walk into the White House as a leader. He walked in as a pawn. Which brings us to number 3, Lil Wayne. If Ice-T saw Kanye as a political puppet, then Wayne was the face of something even more troubling, a surreal, cartoon-like version of gangster rap that, in Ice-T's eyes, distorted the foundation of hip-hop. To him, Lil Wayne didn't represent the street, she represented a hyper-stylized version of it, packaged for mass consumption and drenched in neon-colored bravado. With his syrup-laced vocals, wild metaphors, and diamond-studded image, Wayne took the pain of the block and turned it into something Ice-T saw as borderline fantasy. Throughout the 2010s, Ice-T didn't hesitate to call it out. In interviews and commentary, he frequently grouped Wayne with artists like Soulja Boy and even Snoop Dogg artists he felt were drifting too far from the genre's roots. What especially irked him were the lyrics that leaned into street mythology without the weight of reality behind them. Take the line, "I got a chopper in the car." Ice-T's response was sharp and immediate. "Yeah, right you do." There was no satire in his voice, just straight-up disbelief. To Ice, those bars weren't just overblown, they were reckless theater. But the issue wasn't just about barcid, it was about influence. Ice-T believed Lil Wayne's overwhelming popularity helped usher in a cultural shift where gimmicks outpaced grit. Gone were the vivid stories of survival and struggle. In their place came punchlines, catchphrases, and music videos dripping with surreal excess. Songs were no longer tools for resistance or reflection, they were backdrops for brand partnerships and viral dance trends. For a rapper like Ice-T, who built his name on street-coded storytelling, this was more than disappointing, it was a loss. Wayne never directly responded to Ice-T's criticisms, but the friction between their styles was obvious. Ice-T's disapproval lived between the lines and the cold tone of interviews, the generational distance, and the visible frustration of watching hip-hop evolve into something unrecognizable. And while Ice-T may not have seen Wayne as the enemy, he saw him as the symbol of a turning point, a moment when rap music began prioritizing spectacle over substance. In Ice-T's world, Lil Wayne wasn't the villain, but he was the billboard for a version of hip-hop that Ice-T never signed off on, and never will. Number 4 is Rick Ross. Now let's talk about deception, and for Ice-T, no artist embodied that word more than Rick Ross. To the public, Ross was the boss. A larger-than-life figure dripping in luxury, rhyming about kilos and criminal empires with the swagger of a street legend. His lyrics painted vivid pictures of cartels and power moves. But to Ice-T, it was all smoke and mirrors, because behind the expensive shades and gold chains was something Ross hoped no one would notice: his past as a corrections officer. When that detail surfaced in 2008, Ice-T didn't just lose respect, he drew a line. In his VH1 documentary Planet Rock, the story of hip-hop and the crack generation, Ice-T called Ross out with zero filter. He said, "Rick Ross stole a name. He thinks he's Freeway Rick, Larry Hoover, Big Meech, Tupac. Who the f are you really?" That wasn't just a jab, it was personal. Freeway Rick Ross, the man Ross named himself after, wasn't a made-up character. He was a real kingpin who spent years in prison, and he happened to be Ice-T's close friend. Watching someone take that identity, strip it of consequence, repurpose it for branding, and use it as a stage name hit Ice-T on a deeper level. It wasn't just cultural appropriation, it was criminal glamorization without the scars. Ice-T came from an era where there was a code. If you rapped about the life, you had to live it. But now, in his words, kids will believe any motherfucker thing. There's no accountability anymore. That line wasn't just about Ross, it was a critique of the entire industry. To Ice-T, Ross symbolized a dangerous shift in hip-hop, where background checks no longer mattered, where fantasy outweighed facts, and where artists could manufacture credibility like a product. And while Ross's career only grew bigger with chart-topping albums, MMG signees, and even partnerships with brands like Reebok Ice-T never bought into the image. He saw it as rap turning into cosplay and warned that the genre was starting to reward illusion over integrity. This wasn't just a diss, it was a cultural reckoning. Ice-T wasn't trying to tear Ross down, he was trying to remind the world what hip-hop once stood for: truth, pain, and real stories. And to him, Rick Ross was none of that. Number 5 brings us to LL Cool J. This one was different. Unlike the others, this wasn't about fake gang ties or performative rap personas. This was old school competition at its purest form. It was about pride, territory, dominance. In the late 1980s, LL Cool J and Ice-T were two of the most powerful voices in hip-hop, LL repping Queens and the East Coast with cocky flair, and Ice-T flying the flag for the West Coast with raw, street-born authenticity. They were both carving out empires in a game that was still figuring itself out. At a time when rap battles were about lyrical skill and regional representation, LL began calling himself the greatest rapper alive. That didn't sit well with Ice-T, who was laying his own foundation on the opposite coast.
But I'm saying, what was your issue with LL
No issue.
rap beef?
No issue. Just LL said he was the greatest rapper.
The tension built quietly until Ice-T dropped a line on The Syndicate, mocking LL's repetition and arrogance. How many times on one album can you say, "You're deaf, I'm bad, yo punk, save your breath"? LL didn't hesitate to fire back. On his 1990 track, To Daybreak of Dawn, he took aim directly, rapping the made album with the whack Ice-T. Just like that, it was on. But here's what made this rivalry different: T never left the music. There were no threats, no street level drama, no social media theatrics like we see today. It was bars, pure bars. And as fans took sides, East versus West, cool versus hard, Ice-T later admitted that it was never personal. "We were young lions," he told Drink Champs in 2017. That was healthy competition. What seemed like beef was really just two alphas flexing their muscles in a culture that demanded dominance. And in many ways, their clash pushed both men to sharpen their pens and prove their worth. But even lions eventually lay down their Years later, Ice-T and LL had an unexpected reconciliation, helped along by none other than hip-hop elder Afrika Bambaataa. They finally had a real sit-down, decades after the disses, and realized there was never real hate, just ego and timing. In 2020, Ice-T even posted a photo of the two of them together on Instagram with the caption, "Here's a pic hip-hop heads probably thought they'd never see." Today, they're not just cool, they're respected peers who took different paths but ended up as pioneers. Still, make no mistake, at that time, this was one of the fiercest rivalries in early hip-hop, and it helped define a generation of rap where lyrical skill and dominance truly matter. Coming in at number 6 is 6 ix to Ice-T. This wasn't just another name on the list, it was a full-blown circus. Tekashi 6ix9ine exploded onto the scene with face tattoos, rainbow hair, and a mouth full of disrespect. He claimed gang ties, threw up flags, and barked threats on social media like it was a WWE audition. But behind the screaming and trolling was something Ice-T recognized instantly: a kid playing with fire, pretending to live a life he clearly didn't understand. And when the heat came, he folded fast. In 2018, 6ix9ine was arrested in connection with the 9 Trey gangsta on charges that included racketeering, trafficking, and conspiracy to commit. The entire hip-hop world held its breath. Would Tekashi keep it solid or flip? It didn't take long to find out. On the stand, he gave it all up: names, dates, affiliations, even his own crew. And while some laughed and called him a meme, Ice-T didn't find it funny. He was furious, not just at the snitching but at the entire performance that led to it. In interviews, Ice-T said it plain: "Play stupid games, win federal prizes." He criticized the new wave of artists who basically testified on themselves in their own songs. "You don't want to dry snitch on yourself," he warned. "Some of these cats are making records about what they did the night before. Are you Serious? He wasn't just speaking about Tekashi. He was calling out a dangerous trend where artists confuse clout with credibility and end up in real-life indictments because of it. To Ice-T, 6ix9ine wasn't just a fraud. He was a walking cautionary tale. The ultimate example of what happens when rap becomes performance art detached from any real consequence. He'd built an image off fake gang affiliations and flashy violence, and when the system caught up with him, there was nothing real left to stand on. The bars turned into evidence. The fans turned on him, and the industry quietly stepped away. For Ice-T, this wasn't surprising. It was inevitable, because when you treat the street code like a prop, the streets and the feds will call your bluff, and that's exactly what happened. And finally, we arrive at number 7, Young Thug. Out of everyone on Ice-T's list, this one hit the hardest and the most recent. In May 2022, Young Thug, born Jeffrey Williams, was arrested alongside Gunna and 26 others in a sweeping RICO indictment that accused their label, YSL, of operating as a violent criminal organization. Authorities claimed the group was behind a string of serious crimes, including armed robbery, drug trafficking, and even murder. But what stunned fans even more was how prosecutors built their case not just with surveillance or testimony, but with lyrics. That's right, lines from Thugger's own songs were entered into evidence, with prosecutors arguing that his music was not just entertainment, but confession. And just as the hip-hop world began debating the use of rap lyrics in court, Ice-T stepped in with a line that went viral. He tweeted, "It's easy to make the streets think you're a gangster. It's hard to convince the feds you're not." He didn't name names. He didn't have to. The message was chilling, and everyone knew who it was aimed at. It wasn't just a diss, it was a warning dressed as wisdom. What made that moment even more haunting was that just a year earlier, Young Thug had sat across from Wallow 267 on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast. Wallow, who spent 20 years behind bars, had looked Thug in the eye and practically begged him to think twice. "It's lonely than a murder in prison," Wallow warned, emotion thick in his voice. It was one of the realest, rawest moments caught on camera. But whether Thug didn't hear either, chose to ignore either, kept pushing forward, and that was how Thug kept fighting for his freedom behind bars. To Ice-T, this wasn't surprising, it was tragic. For decades, he's warned younger rappers about blurring the line between the life they live and the life they rap. Ice-T isn't anti-art, but he's pro-reality, and Young Thug's case confirmed everything he had been saying. The gangster image might sell records, but when the law comes calling, it becomes evidence. In Ice-T's world, real gangsters don't brag they survive. Pretending to be one might earn you likes and followers, but in the real world, it can cost you your life, your legacy, or your freedom. And Young Thug's story is a brutal reminder of that. So what does all this tell us? That Ice-T isn't just an actor, a rapper, or a talking head. He's a keeper of the code, a voice from an era where credibility mattered more than clout. He's never chased trends, never bowed to popularity. He's called out the fakery, the fantasy, and the foolishness without apology. Some of these artists he hated publicly. Others he just warned with cold, perfect words. But one thing's for sure, in a game full of noise, Ice-T still cuts through. So what do you think? Did he go too far? Or was he just saying what everybody else was thinking? Let us know in the comments, because if this is just the tip of the iceberg, what else is hip-hop hiding? And stick around, because the truth, it always comes back around.